Hey guys, it's Selwen here. With Battle for Azeroth drawing ever closer to us and even more closer the pre-patch, let's talk about all the changes there's been to the classes. Primarily melee DPS on this first one, and then rank them in order of what I think are the most fun and basically well-rounded designed specs, just in terms of gameplay, as numbers aren't yet final. Now, before going into any specifics, let's talk about the changes that affect all the melees and DPSers at this current point in time. Well, the first one that everyone is gonna notice is the global cooldown change. Very controversial since its inception in BFA's beta. If you don't know what that actually means, it's just the very short cooldown that you get whenever you click an ability. In Legion, some abilities were absent of that, such as cooldowns. In BFA, not so much. Now, currently isn't all that bad. Where all specs are gonna find this change is mainly on the DPS cooldowns, like Pillars of Frost in the Frost Decay or Recklessness, old Battle Cry on the Fury Warrior. Now, the line between where global cooldowns is and isn't applied is rather thin, as some abilities don't get it, such as the Tiger's Fury from the Ferals or Symbols of Death from the Sub-Rogues, plus some defensives or mobility or things like trinkets or ratios can, although not necessarily, be out of the global cooldown rule. In the description down below, you'll find a comprehensive list from Wowhead to check each and every ability that is now on the glorious global cooldown change. For the most part, in terms of gameplay, will be subjective. Some people won't mind it, some will, and Blizzard did took some steps to change the cooldowns in order for them to function better in this new world, although on some specs you're gonna feel slightly slower, as in some situations it can break a bit of the flow, like you just had a nasty speed bump. Other big changes was the way our abilities scale. Now they do with both attack power and weapon damage. Bleeds and poisons actually benefit from haste to tick faster, and of course there's a huge stats and item level squish to bring our numbers back to the thousands instead of millions. Taking that aside, in most specs you can also say goodbye to most of your artifact goodies and Legos. Some effects you do get them back in the form of talents or some lucky ones as baseline, but for the most part they are gone. You do get your new Azerite armor, but we're not gonna talk about that in this video. All of that said, let's get started. Starting at the bottom here, not a huge surprise, the Enhancement Shaman. Yay, what's there to say about this? Well, Enhancement is part of the threesome that were just left behind during BFA's class changes, and isn't without reason, as it's feeling quite clunky. For the most part, you still have the same abilities, but without the artifact goodies, which do hurt you a lot, and in Legion it was still pretty RNG heavy with the Stormstrike procs and whatnot, and here as well, but when your supposed filler, Lavalash, is better than your main ability, something isn't quite right. That said, those are numbers and can be easily changed, but on top, overall AoE and cleave feels even weaker and slower, and in general all of your management of procs and Maelstrom are less meaningful, mainly due to the procs being completely free now on the Stormstrikes, leading to waste of resources. Your talents, however, is where all of that RNG nonsense will come in. I mean, there's Hot Hand, a proc, a new Landslide, a proc to increase Stormstrike damage by 100%, but worse above all, Elemental Spirits, turning your doggos into a pure slot machine fiesta, where you can get a completely randomized combination of them. Get the Fire Doggy? Great, more 25% fire damage. Get the Lightning one? Awesome, 100% more damage on Stormstrike. That's actually quite insane. Oh, but then there's the Frost one, which just gives me a tiny bit of extra damage on attacks, and a slow. But wait, I can also get the same elements? So you are saying that I can get up to 200% more damage on Stormstrike with this cooldown, but it's completely randomized, on top of getting regular procs and the Landslide buff? Wow. Now compare that with getting 2 Frost Doggies. Might as well not even DPS at all, right? Besides that, we also get new awesome talents like Searing Assault, a dot on top of a dot ability, like really? Not to mention that we are still one of the squishiest melees, but isn't all that bad. We did get Tremor Totem back as well for more utility, and our Earth Elemental and Totems, so yay us. But yeah, that's the most positives, along with the Lightning Shield talents that actually now is usable. Enhanced is in a really weird place right now, and I really enjoyed it in Legion. It felt extremely satisfying even with all the RNG, but Legos, the tier sets and your artifact goodies really made the spec shine on some aspects, allowing you, if you knew what you were doing, to set up these perfect moments of glory when you set up everything perfectly with your cooldowns and procs and Maelstrom, and of course coupled with awesome aesthetics as well. And now it's just the shell of its former self with a buttload of RNG on top. But we are strong, we are brave, and we will wait for that patch to fix us, but for now, this is what we get. Just be warned that our numbers could still be decent if we do get some boosts, if that's something that is worrying you the most. Next on the list is the Feral Druid. Now the kitty cat is here not because it's feeling weird or clunky like Enhancement, it's just because it's practically the same. I actually liked Feral in Legion. After the changes it became pretty decent, besides the fact that our DPS was so based around this cooldown window. But we were decent with our bleeds, burst, but in BFA it's the same, but worse. We lost our artifacts, so it makes our AoE outside of Brutal Slash worse and more boring. We lost the ability itself to a last tier talent, preventing us to either get Blood Talents or Moment of Clarity if we really wanted. Our bleeds now do benefit from haste, which is good, even though I said on my guide that they did in Legion, but actually don't, and I'm an idiot. We also get Tiger Dash as a big burst of speed, replacing Displacer Beast, which is worse, but I'm not gonna discuss that here. We get 2 utility abilities back, like Soothe, removing enrage effects, so more utility, and Hibernate, CC to beasts and dragon skin and whatnot, which is cool, so again more utility, but that's it. Everything gameplay-wise is practically the same as in Legion, with some small number changes like the nerfs to Moment of Clarity to 50%. So yeah, if you like it there, it's still here exactly in the same way. It is feeling slower, but that's probably just a gearing issue. And overall, again, it's decent gameplay-wise, and I'm particularly thankful for Tiger's Fury to be out of the GCD. It's just really sad seeing that it got practically no changes gameplay-wise, but instead it plays the same but worse and lessened without the artifact, which is the key words on BFA class design really. Following up, I would say they are all pretty decent, so from now on to the top 3, I really had the same levels of enjoyment, and they are pretty much in even fields, so don't be alarmed to see your favorite spec next, alright? So the Outlaw got some shit in Legion with all the slot machine memes with Roll the Bones playstyle, and yes, it was annoying as all hell, but guess what, some people actually enjoyed it, so that's here to stay. However, we still have our slice and dice, if you really hated it. Core abilities wise, they have stayed largely the same except for our Blade Flurry, which is a much cooler ability now. In Legion was just this active buff that you just set and it becomes active and you start cleaving. But now it's an active ability on 2 charges that only stays for a couple of seconds, with no energy penalty. This overall means that your cleave in AoE is so much more fun, as now you actually have to plan around with it a little bit and fit as many abilities as you can to do the most AoE. I was actually really happy to see this change. And besides that, it's just number changes to our, for example, Restless Blades and other passives and abilities. That said, a lot of new things comes from your talents. So now with a quick draw and ghostly strike, we gained Weapon Master. Sinister Strike has a 10% chance to strike an additional time. Marked for Death went down a few tiers. Loaded Dice, which was a trait to kinda combat the RNG of Roll the Bones to gain a second buff after you use Adrenaline Rush, is now in the same tier as Alacrity and Slice and Dice. Slice and Dice still working all the same. And then on a final tier we get Dancing Steel to improve our new Blade Flurry, increasing its duration and damage. Or you get Blade Rush, an ability on a 45-second cooldown, benefits from Restless Blades, charging to the target, damaging it, and all targets around in cleave. But if Blade Flurry was active, the cleave targets take double the damage. And the classic Killing Spree, that actually it's usable now, teleporting to the target and damaging it repeatedly or damaging all targets nearby if Blade Flurry was active on a 2-minute cooldown. So with all of that said, Outlaw plays mostly the same, both with a Slice and Dice or Roll the Bones, just lessens with the loss of the traits and the artifact ability, but in AoE is a lot more fun with the new Blade Flurry in combination with either Blade Rush, which is my favorite, or Killing Spree. It keeps you more on your toes in terms of when you should press it, and if you combo with Slice and Dice playstyle, you get that super fast gameplay which can be fun on that simple factor alone. As for Assassination, like Outlaw, got most of its changes to its talents, and in Legion was a fairly decent spec, not overly complicated, mostly about keeping up dots and Envenom and stuff. Our only AoE was kinda shit, Poison Bomb. Oh, Poison Bomb. I have nightmares. And yes, it is back, although optional, so yay. Core abilities wise, only our Vendetta got changes to also grant us 60 energy for 3 seconds. Now in your talents we now get Blindside, an execute/proc based ability, usable below 30% of HP, costing 30 energy and granting 1 combo point, but Mutilate has a 25% chance to make it free and usable whenever. I don't know how powerful this can potentially be, because numbers can change, but gameplay wise, it's cool. Getting a proc adds some unpredictability to the spec, although outside of the free proc doesn't feel all that nice replacing Mutilates for the executes sort of phase. Just doesn't feel as powerful in terms of combo point generation. Then we get Master Assassin, which is basically our Lego shoulders, increasing our crit chance for 50% while in stealth or 3 seconds after. A bit weaker, but still, we get it here. Like Outlaw, we got marked for death down here, and we still get Exsanguinate and Toxic Blade going against each other, basically making us choose between the bleed-based setup or poison one. Although Venom Rush is here now, which is a bit weird, but he's now granting 5 energy whenever Mutilates hits a poison target. Again weird going against its other 2 talents, but does help with your energy. And last year we have new things like Crimson Tempest, a finisher costing a 35 energy, and basically it's an AoE rupture. Pretty cool for dungeons, granted if the dot has time to tick. Hidden Blades comes from another Lego where every 2 seconds you get a buff to increase the damage of Fangs of Knives for 20%. Alright, and Poison Bomb still works the same. Envenom and Rupture has a 4% chance to create a pool of poison underneath you, damaging enemies. Still is that good old burst and annoying as hell for AoE on that awful RNG, but weirdly, if you're gonna go on a single target fight such as a boss, you're most likely gonna take Poison Bomb anyway, because the others don't really do anything, so yeah. Next comes up the Retribution Paladin. I was never a fan of Retri, okay? I always felt that it was quite stale in terms of its gameplay, especially in Legion. But this BFA version actually had so much needed change or improvements. The biggest ones were the complete change to the judgment mechanic. No longer it works like a Colossus Smash, instead it just applies a debuff to increase the damage of your next spender by 25%, all in once, plus grants 1 holy power. This one just fixes one of the most annoying and boring things of the Retribution in Legion. And because of that, our mastery changed as well to only increase holy damage. The other awesome change was to bring a Blade of Wrath proc to baseline, called Art of War. This was highly requested change, and it's great to know that devs actually hear our feedback. Shadow Priest. With these two big changes, Talents also got a lot of changes to replicate that. Zeal has changed to be completely a passive option. Execution Sentence is your new Colossus Smash type of ability, but is on a cooldown and costs 3 holy power. The new Blade of Wrath talent now increases the RNG chance and the damage of your Blade of Justice. Hammer of Wrath makes a return in all its glory and nostalgia, although seeing it as a talent it hurts, I know, and can be frustrating, but I'm gonna try and look at it on the bright side and just be thankful that it's back. Consecration received some really good buffs to it, actually making it worthwhile of a choice now, dealing much more damage and granting 1 holy power. And your artifact abilities here turned talents and even talents to improve your judgments through AoE, called Divine Judgment. In the last tier, you get Inquisition that also makes a return, much like Hammer of Wrath, just a buff to keep up, increasing damage and haste, but costing holy power as well. All around, our talents are much better. You do have a lot of choices here to make depending on what you're doing or what you are looking for, be AoE, burst, sustain. All can be created here, and in general it still is a very simple spec, not much going for it, but it does play smoother and feels more engaging and more interesting than in Legion. Aesthetically, we also got a small change to Divine Storm, but overall you still look cool as ever as Unholy boy. Next we have the Sub Rogue. Sub, personally, for me, was the most fun spec of the rogues, simply because it had the most interesting toolkit, with more things going for it. Yes, it was more complex, but felt more engaging overall, with your shadow dances and symbols of death, and combining all of that with bigger finishers like Death and Above. And in BFA, it's still all about them finishers, but no more Death from Above. I mean, yeah, I know. But Symbols of Death is here and it's out of the GCD, so yay us. It's like the other two rogue specs, nothing much as a change. You will be missed, old friends. But baseline changes there is to your slows. Now you automatically add a 30% slow on backstabs and shadow strikes. Your Shadow Techniques passive gives 8 energy on top of the 1 combo points that it gives when it procs, and Shadow Dance lasts 1 more second. Now Talent's Weapon Master now triggers from Shadow Strike and Backstab for an extra attack on a 15% chance. Find Weakness, your Shadow Strike or Sheep Shot applies a debuff to ignore 40% of the target armor for 10 seconds. Pretty cool to improve your Shadow Dance windows and whatnot. Marked for Death down here again, Night Terrors to add the slow to your Shuriken Storm, and on the final tier we still get Master of Shadows for more energy during those Shadow Dance windows. Secret Technique is here to replace your Death from Above, a new finisher on a 30-second cooldown, creating 3 clones of yourself, damaging the target and all around, but at reduced damage. So again, working much like Death from Above, but currently in beta it's still bugged. Shuriken Tornado is a new one, costing 60 energy on a 1-minute cooldown that when you activate for the next 4 seconds, you're gonna automatically send a Shuriken Storm every second. At first, it's really weird, but it's actually quite cool in practice. AoE and Sub still works the same as in Legion, like you use multiple targets just to use more finishers on your Night-Bladed target. So what Shuriken Tornado is gonna allow is for you to do the same, but save global cooldowns on Shuriken Storm itself, essentially granting AoE burst, where you're gonna time an Eviscerate right when it lands, every 1 second. Again, a bit weird, but once you get the hang of it, pretty cool. In general, still pretty much the same as in Legion, even with the loss of death from above, with all the planning on your shadow dances and symbols of death, just to have more and bigger finishers. Now, the Survival Hunter, as you all know, wasn't all that great in Legion, right? It had its issues, to put it nicely, but in general, here in BFA is playing much better. What first you're gonna find is that Survival has turned to this sort of Hunter hybrid, or ranged hybrid, as yes, you are primarily still melee, wearing two-handed weapons. It seems the dream of wielding two axes like Rexar is still yet to come true, but you also have a variety of ranged attacks now, like Serpent Sting, a poison dot that you fire from this little crossbow, much like the pistol of the Outlaw rogues, or your Wildfire Bomb, serving as your way to AoE, all of that in a 40-yard range. Mix that with your main ability, Raptor Strike, that you can spam as much as you want based on focus, and your own version of kill commands that makes your pet attack, actually granting you focus with a small chance to reset. So as a proc, your pet here still takes a big role on the spec, and for some reason I always loved being in a fray with him and can now grant buffs such as Bloodlust if it's specced in Ferocity, no matter what type of pet it is. On top, you still get Aspect of the Eagle cooldown, turning your otherwise melee ability, Raptor Strike, into a 40-yard range one, damaging with the avatar of the eagle itself, looking pretty damn cool while doing so. So the line between being ranged and melee is really not set here in Survival. As for your main cooldown, if you're wondering, is now Coordinated Assault, which is much like Bestial Wrath copy-paste, and even using a similar visual effect, increasing your damage of you and your pet by 20% and increasing the chance of kill commands cooldown reset by 20%, while your mastery now just increases the damage on focus spending abilities. With that, you obviously get loads of talent changes as well, simple things like giving 2 charges to your kill commands, or turning your Serpent Sting into a proc, dealing much more damage as burst, and then further improving it by making it cleave 3 targets, which is particularly cool for dungeons. Some to make it return, like Butchery, Murderer of Crows, Steel Trap, Chakrams, which is basically the Sidewinders from MM, and I think Chakrams was part of Survival in some expansion, I don't remember, or even Mongoose Bite returned as a talent. Still works in the same way, it's just replacing your Raptor Strike, so it uses focus, and it works alright with a new Burst of Prey to increase your CD window, so you get a lot more burst damage. But you can take this other choice to keep with your Raptor Strike gameplay, improving it by each kill commands that you use, and then stacks up for more damage. But by far the most fun talent is Wildfire Infusion, infusing your Wildfire Bomb with different properties, which come at random, but you can actually see the different colors on your bar, so not only you have to memorize them, but can also offer some pretty interesting gameplay by planning ahead of time. Obviously, we'll create a great synergy with Guerrilla Tactics back here for an extra charge on your bomb. As for Flanking Strike, it still exists as a sort of second skill command, just for more focus, if you so wish, and not forgetting that we still bring a good amount of utility from traps and pets themselves, misdirection, and even our stun, our singular stun, was made baseline. Mobility also received a boost by getting a disengaged baseline like the other Hunter specs. In the end, Survival feels a bit like BM, but with more tricks and requiring a bit more of brain power, but between your melee attacks, pets, bombs, poisons and traps makes for a pretty cool and engaging gameplay both visually and mechanically, although our AoE is still largely based on cooldown abilities. You were here, Survival, but now you are here, and that's what I like to see. So, the Havoc Demon Hunter. Havoc was one of those specs that received quite a lot of changes, primarily due to how we were dependent on the artifact, and even then, losing it hurt us quite a bit. But personally, I feel that it's playing pretty decently. That said, there is a vast number of people that are not really fancying Havoc anymore, and it's understandable. Now, core gameplay wise is mostly the same, besides the change to Chaos Strike to no longer benefit from crits and instead just have a 40% chance flat to refunds, and a new ability that was added, Consume Magic, that acts as a purge, so more utility, which is amazing. And some nerfs to your stun, and a couple of number changes such as reducing meta cooldown or I-beam doing double the damage on your primary target, which is really good actually. But the rest is just lessened with the artifact removal. That said, the big changes comes from your talents. The demonic style of play is still well and alive, and you can no longer take Nemesis nor Demonic Appetite with it, as they are now in the same tier as Demonic and Blind Fury respectively, which sucks, but still perfectly playable. The Demon Blade's style of play with the one-button mashing still exists, however, with the removal of Chaos Blades as a cooldown, it feels pretty much dead. Other changes is the Immolation Aura making its way here as an AoE and also generates Fury along with it. Insatiable Hunger as your Lego Ring for more Fury on your Demon's Bite, although you cannot have it with Demon Blades as they are in the same tier, another reason why it's weaker. Fell Barrage got a much needed change, and now it's just an awesome new 1 minute cooldown for all of your AoE burst needs, and Cycle of Hatred working kinda like your Lego Shoulders. Now, what puts people away from this is this little talent right here, Dark Slash. It's on a 20-second cooldown and essentially opens this Colossus Smash type of window to your Chaos Strike to deal 40% more damage for 8 seconds. And it really seems this will be your go-to for single target. Now, personally, I enjoy it as a talent, as it adds more depth and more compelling gameplay to your Demon Hunter. That said, I can understand why people dislike it, as it doesn't feel very Havoc-ish. But yeah, in general, if the idea of that talent tickles you fancy, you're gonna enjoy your new Havoc in combination with other new things like Immolation Aura. In AoE, you know all about it, is still satisfying and fun as ever with your beams and your barrages. There's also this new setup of talents that seem very mobility based, like Fell Rushes and Vengeful Retreats, with the new momentum and Fell Mastery, although it feels super clunky and weird with all the jumping around, but it works, sort of. The Frost Decay, for the most part, is playing the same as in Legion, but we did get some changes. But first of all, as most of you might wonder, can we finally wield two-handed weapons again? The answer is no, as most abilities simply won't be usable like in survival with dual wield, but the dream shall live on. So what has been changed? Well, cooldowns for the most part, because one, the global cooldown change really put a Frost in a weird spot, but thankfully the changes do help, even though popping your cooldowns now does break the flow of the spec a bit. But Hungering Rune Weapon was changed to have a cooldown of 2 minutes instead of 3, and instead of refreshing all runes is now a buff that stays for 20 seconds and every 5 seconds grants 1 rune and 5 runic power, plus on top gives you 15% haste. So now it functions more like a pure DPS cooldown in the sense that you can pop it at the start of fights to get that haste, and not just as a way to get resources. Pillars of Frost also got big changes. It's now on a 45-second cooldown and increases your strength by 15% for 15 seconds, but each rune spent will increase it further by 1%, so 2% per Obliterate. Not only that, in your talents, Obliteration is now activated with Pillars of Frost itself, so lasting for longer, plus with a 40% chance to grant a rune when consuming those killing machines. Other baseline changes is to your mobility. Wraithwalk is no longer part of it, but is instead a talent. We now get Death's Advance as our main mobility, increasing our speed by 30% and makes us immune to knockbacks. As for other big changes are on talents, and was obviously some shuffling around, as now you can have Frostsight with Gathering Storm for an example, but Cold Heart from the Lego chest made its way here as well. Icy Talons now works with every runic power based ability. This is whatever. Runic Attenuation received a small boost to a 3 runic power, and so did Frozen Pulse, and this one is whatever as well, just a passive. And Glacial Advance was made usable by, instead of using runes, it uses 30 runic power, so we can finally AoE with runic power instead of runes, at least on that cooldown. Plus, it also triggers the obliteration effect, and our amazing dragon also made its way here, although choosing it will be quite hard. As for Breath of Snidagrosa, I know how much you love it. Well, some of you. I do too, and I'm glad to say that it does work better here in BFA in terms of talent synergy, and with the new Hungering Rune weapon, although it won't be as good as it was during Nighthold. Probably just something to use in some cleaving fights. Ice Cap is also here, but functions in the same way to get even faster Pillars of Frost. So overall, Frost is looking pretty goddamn good. Core gameplay wise is pretty much the same, a simple spec that you know, but very spammy and with that micromanagement of resources. The cooldowns are more interesting, but the global cooldown does break a flow a little bit. As for your talents are overall better as well, especially since at the end of Legion we had so many dead ones. Following, we get the Windwalker Monk. Windwalker is one of those specs that I always freaking loved, especially in Legion, but I could never get into it due to its visuals and aesthetics. I just cannot get into the theme of it, even though mechanically it's just so goddamn amazing. And in BFA it got even better in some ways. Windwalker had an issue in Legion. They were too predictable. The combo play was great and all, but after a while it could get boring. But in BFA, a very small change was introduced to your Blackout Kick to reduce the cooldown of Rising Sun Kick and Fists of Fury by 1 second, and this small change alone made the already present combo play even more fun and engaging, because now you're not bound by the ever same cooldowns and rotation. Getting Blackout Kick procs now actually matter. Not only are they more important, but they can also change your rotation, as getting 1 less second on the Rising Sun Kick is quite a big deal. So for you to maximize those abilities now, you need to do further planning and management of your combos and chi, while at the same time the RNG of the kicks is gonna slightly change that, adding what Windwalkers needed, some unpredictability. The most sad change that we got was actually a nerf to our spinning crane kick that only stacks up to 5 now. I know, I loved getting those very high stacks myself, but that's gone now. Now, we lost our artifact ability, but we did gain some things on your talents. For one, Chi Burst now grants Chi per target hit, making it an even more valuable choice in AoE. Energizing Elixir, though, got heavily nerfed, probably to break its dominance, as now only grants 2 Chi, but we do get Fist of the White Tiger here instead to sort of replace your artifact ability Button Press, costing 40 energy and granting 3 Chi. Hit Combo also got its power cut in half, but like Energizing Elixir, it did break its dominance, as now Selwen is more appealing to take, especially since it's on a 2-minute cooldown, and the new Rushing Jade Winds looks quite appealing also, as now works much like Fear of Air from Enhancement Shamans, staying permanently but draining 4 energy per second. On the last tier, Serenity actually lasts for longer on 12 seconds, making it overall better, and a Spiritual Focus reducing the cooldown of your main city, Storm, Earth and Fire, by every 2 Chi spent, further emphasizing good management of resources and combo play, and with gear it will also improve it even more so. So there's not much else to say about Windwalker. If you liked it in Legion, you're gonna enjoy it here probably even more, as these small changes makes for even more fun, engaging and exciting gameplay. And now we're gonna enter the last 3, the big boys. At this point, isn't very hard to guess what's coming up, but the following 3 are the specs that I had the most fun, but also the ones I felt were the most worked on. So let's get into them. The Unholy DK. Unholy was one of my favorite specs in Legion as well. The disease spreading, the minions, the wounds, all of that made the spec really quite interesting, lots of management, buttons to press, and even procs, but you were constantly engaged in what you were doing and visually represented that perfectly, plus highly rewarding of good gameplay. Now, it had some issues, and BFA actually fixes them. So for one, our artifact ability is now baseline. It's weaker at only 4 wounds and doesn't give runes, but our overall wound play change, as now it only stacks up to 6, and our fast range strike grants 2 to 3 wounds. Overall, completely removes the RNG factor that the spec had on openers, which is great and makes the overall wounds play more predictable, fair, and not as hectic. The other change was on Death Coil and Dark Transformation, as now Death Coil has the Shadow Infusion talent baseline to reduce the cooldown of Dark Transformation, but only by 1 second, which will in turn reward good play around your resources and management even more so than currently. The other big change is to your mobility. We now get Death's Advance, increasing our movement speed and becoming immune to knockbacks, but Wraithwalk is now a talent, just like the Frost Decays. Speaking of which, we do get some decent changes there as well. All Will Serve is still here as the Black Sheep, but hopefully it will be changed in the future. Harbinger of Doom has turned to a talent, your Abomination is gone and you're back to having your Ghoul, so I'm glad for that. I'm sure some of you are as well, and some talent shuffling here, but primarily AoE is where the big changes and good ones come from, like the new Epidemic, that now actually costs runic power 30, effectively fixing the issue we had in AoE, no runic power spender. Now we do, and makes AoE even more exciting. It would be cool though if it also could be usable from the free proc from Sun and Dooms, or benefit the Dark Transformation cooldown like Death Coil, but currently that isn't the case. The new Pestilence is also decent, but taking Epidemic is much a better choice. And Holy Blight back here can also improve our AoE, this time in a more bursty manner, as it's a cooldown dot essentially. Last year we get Army of the Damned just to get more minions. Death Coil and Epidemic reduce the cooldown of Army of the Dead for 5 seconds and Apocalypse by 1, so further emphasizing proper use of Death Coil as well, and with gear is just gonna get better, kinda like the Windwalkers. And Holy Frenzy is a Bloodlust-like cooldown, increasing our haste to 20% on each melee attack, applies the festering wound, so pretty good even for AoE to get more of your wound burst AoE galore with Death and Decay, and feels quite fun in single target as well, as you can get quite spammy with your bursting of wounds. And Summon Gargoyle is your new Dark Arbiter, but you can still change it back as a glyph or an NPC to a Valkyr, but is weaker now. It's on a 3-minute cooldown, lasts for 30 seconds, which is a boost, but the attack power increase to runic power ratio is now 1% attack power to 2 runic power. So it can be weaker, but it lasts for longer, and it is still that bursty cooldown ability that ramps up with all the planning and setup, just like in Legion. So Unholy in general still plays the same, but better, and that's all we could ask on this already amazing spec. Our AoE is better than ever, and our single target is pretty goddamn fun also. The Arms Warrior, and it came from a weird place in Legion, a place where our gameplay was summed up to be about pressing these 2 same buttons over and over on a proc. But oh boy, now they'd suffer some changes, if I dare say revamped, as it barely plays the same. So if you played it in Legion, you know about the Colossus Smash Mortal Strike combo, quite boring and frustrating. So in BFA they took that idea and instead baked it into the new Overpower, but instead increasing the damage of your next Mortal Strike by 25%, but stacked 2 times. Not only that, Overpower works as your Tactician proc that you get when spending Rage, so through Mortal Strikes themselves or Slam. So on that alone, on that proc and that management of Mortal Strike buffs, makes all of your gameplay much more interesting and engaging. Couple that with the new /old Sweeping Strikes that is back as baseline and on use to cleave, also makes your overall AoE even more fun, as you actually need to do some planning around which is what Arms is all about. As for Colossal Smash, it's just a cooldown now on 45 seconds, along with your Blade Storm. Battle Cry was completely removed from Arms. In terms of rage generation is not an issue at all now. After some recent buffs, rage is something that you have practically constantly, making the flow of the spec even better to its Legion predecessor. Even though it's back to being slow and methodical in some ways, it can also feel pretty fast at times. Add your new mastery Deep Wounds to add bleeds on Mortal Strikes, Executes and Blade Storms, and your abilities get even more meaty. As for talents, we also get amazing changes as well. A Sudden Death makes a return, along with a new ability for on-demand rage, Skull Splitter, if you so need, and a War Machine for more rage on killing enemies. Massacre for a better execute, along with Fervor of Battle to turn your filler slam into Whirlwind. Then on your AoE tier you get Warbreaker, which is your artifact ability, but this time is gonna replace your Colossal Smash to work in AoE form. Great to combo with awesome Blade Storms for a really crazy burst. Or you can take collateral damage for a better sweeping strikes to refund some rage, or cleave as a more sustained type of AoE. Then we get Deadly Calm as a new cooldown to make every ability free for 6 seconds, and is out of the global cooldown now. Or Avatar for more raw damage on cooldown, again great to combo with your other cooldowns. Or In for the Kill to get 10% haste during your Colossal Smash windows, or 20% during your execute phases. Then on the last tier we get Anger Management to get faster Colossal Smash / Warbreakers, and Blade Storms for more cooldowns again, for more bursts, such as in dungeons, or Dreadnoughts for an additional charge on Overpower and to make your overall Overpower / Mortal Strike play better and smoother for single target. So again, overall Arms is feeling amazing. The changes make the spec extremely fun and engaging to play in any situation, be the cooldown stacking getting amazing results, or just methodically be planning your attacks, and every ability and talent, even though we did lost our stun, work perfectly together in this new bloody package. And then, finally, the Fury Warrior. This came at no surprise to most, I believe. The Fury Warrior is just an amazing new spec in Legion, at least in terms of gameplay, which is what I'm talking about here. In numbers, that might be different, but Fury, it just feels right. So what has changed? Well, for one, Enrage now is just worthy of its name. It's not only increasing our damage through our mastery, but our haste to 25%. This alone turns the spec into a freaking killing machine, and you're gonna make your new gameplay overall faster and more meaningful. Raging Blow is now an ability on 2 charges and on a short cooldown that adds a chance to reset. So it actually feels like a great ability to press, and with all this haste, you're just gonna get your abilities so fast that the spam factor adds to the overall theme of the spec, that you are just massacring everything in sight. Our AoE also received changes. Whirlwinds is our new filler, granting a 3 rage and 1 more per target hit, even though you barely need 1 in single target with all that haste, since it reduces all of your cooldowns abilities and, well, global cooldowns themselves. But now the Mid Cleaver buff gets 2 stacks and works with any melee ability, be Rampages, Raging Blows, or even cooldown abilities. So now your cleave / AoE finally feels right, as you are basically permanently cleaving. As for your cooldown, Recklessness changed. It now only grants a 20% crit chance, but doubles the rage generated. So instead of getting crits, you're just gonna get more abilities to press, which means more enrages, which means more massacring. Then we get your talents, which adds even more brutality. First here we get talents to help with rage, Alright, then on here we get our Fury Slashback, which is the only thing about Fury that brings it down, but you don't really need it, especially since there's Inner Rage here, making your Raging Blow better for reduced cooldown and increased damage, or Sudden Death for a proc on executes, which now actually grants 20 rage on a 5-second cooldown, which remember can be reduced by haste. So getting free procs of execute or just doing the normal ones is just fueling you with even more rampages and enrages and just fueling even more abilities in general. And execute can also cleave with mid cleaver. How insane is that? Then here we get these passives to either improve rampage or execute, but there's Frothing Berserker as well, which increases rampage cost, but afterwards grants you a buff, increasing your haste by 5% and your damage by 10%. And then on the AoE choices, there's the improvements to Whirlwind to grant Enrage on a 10% chance, Dragon Roar for a new short cooldown to AoE with, or Bladestorm, which is finally usable here on Fury, granting Rage during its duration and perfect to combo with your Enrages for burst AoE or your new cooldown Siege Breaker. So on the final tier, we either gonna get an improvement for Recklessness to grant 100 rage and lasts for 4 seconds more, much like in Legion, Anger Management to get it faster, or the Siege Breaker, a Colossus Smash style ability on a 30-second cooldown, leaving a debuff to increase our damage by 15% for 10 seconds, also granting 10 rage. But you can cleave with your mid cleaver, spreading it to 5 targets. So amazing for AoE. So Fury isn't a super complicated spec. It really is quite simple. You just have like 3 buttons to click at any given point. But here's the thing, it doesn't need to be super complicated. For a spec to be fun, it doesn't need to have tons of buttons and managements like say an Unholy Decay, even though that it is an amazing spec also. It just needs to be fun. Each button press needs to matter, each cooldown, the combination of abilities and resources, and everything here works goddamn perfectly. Even our mobility adds to the overall brutality and fast pace of the spec. And that's the thing, Fury, along with the past 2 other specs, and some others obviously, really nails the class theme. So there you go, my ranked melee DPS. It can be quite funny that my last 2 best melee picks happen to be on the Fury Warrior, which is generally not my go-to class. I mean, I enjoyed playing it, but it's not any of my favorites. But here, both Harms and Fury feel that they actually got some effort put into them. They feel fresh, engaging, fun, fluid, and every button press feels right. Most other specs can play better than in Legion on some aspects, but doesn't really feel like big improvements like these last 3 did, and maybe the Frost Decay and Windwalker as well. And getting talents that we had as baseline on traits or even LEGO effects, or not getting them at all, feels awful. That's probably one of the biggest issues with the BFA class design. So guys, this has been going on long enough. Make sure to like and subscribe to get more videos like this. The next ones should be shorter on ranged and then tanks and healers, as there's much less specs on there. And hit that bell icon to get more better videos. And check out my Patreon if you wish to support the channel. As always, thank you for watching, have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya.